I'm 42 years old, married for 13 years, 2 kids, a mortgage, a dog that sheds everywhere. The boring, stable life I used to think meant I'd done something right. If you'd asked me a year ago, I would have said my life wasn't perfect, but it was solid. Safe. Predictable in a good way. My wife and I met in our late 20s. We grew up together in a lot of ways. She knew my bad habits, my insecurities, my family baggage. I knew hers. Or at least I thought I did. We built a routine that felt unbreakable. Sunday grocery trips. Friday takeout. Sex that wasn't wild anymore, but felt intimate and familiar. I work for a mid-sized company and have for almost a decade. My boss, Mark, is charismatic, successful, the kind of guy people naturally gravitate toward. I trusted him. Hell, I admired him. He came to our house for barbecues. He knew my kids' names. He called my wife funny and sharp, and I felt weirdly proud of that. Looking back, I hate how normal everything felt. That's the part that messes with me the most. There was no dramatic storm warning. No single moment where the ground cracked open. Just life moving forward quietly, while something rotten was growing underneath. I didn't know yet that my wife was already slipping away from me. Or that my boss was standing right there, smiling, waiting. The changes were small at first. That's how I justify missing them. My wife started staying late at the gym. New clothes showed up in her closet. She guarded her phone more carefully, always face down, always within reach. If I asked who she was texting, she'd laugh and say, "Just work stuff." I wanted to believe her. I needed to. I was exhausted all the time, stressed from work, trying to be a decent father. Questioning her felt like inviting chaos into a life that barely held together as it was. Mark started calling me more often after hours. "Just checking in," he'd say. Or he'd ask about projects that could have waited until Monday. Sometimes I'd hear my wife's voice in the background when he called, and he'd quickly explain they'd run into each other at the gym, or a networking thing. I remember once joking, "You see my wife more than I do." He laughed a little too hard. I laughed too, because that's what you do when you don't want to see something. The red flags were there. Late-night emails. Work trips she suddenly wanted to tag along on. To explore the city? A distance between us that grew slowly, like fog creeping in. We stopped talking about feelings. We talked about logistics. Kids. Bills. Schedules. I told myself this was just what long marriages looked like. That love matured into quiet companionship. I didn't realize how lonely I'd become, even while sharing a bed with her every night. The suspicion didn't hit all at once. It crept in during a random Tuesday evening. My wife was in the shower, and her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I wasn't trying to snoop. I swear that's true. The screen lit up with a notification preview. It was from Mark. Just his name was enough to make my stomach tighten. The message read, "I can't stop thinking about last night." I stood there like an idiot, staring at the phone, my brain scrambling for innocent explanations. Work-related? A joke taken out of context? Anything but what my gut already knew. I didn't open the message. That felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Instead, I put the phone back exactly where it was and sat on the edge of the bed, heart pounding like I'd just been caught doing something wrong. That night I barely slept. My wife curled up next to me, warm and familiar, and I felt like I was lying next to a stranger. Every time she shifted, my mind replayed that sentence over and over. The next day at work, Mark acted completely normal. Friendly. Professional. He even asked how my wife was doing. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. That's when the doubt fully set in. Not a passing thought anymore, but a heavy, constant presence. Once it's there, everything looks different. Every smile feels rehearsed. Every explanation feels thin. I started paying attention in a way I never had before. Patterns emerged. My wife's late gym nights lined up perfectly with Mark's schedule. When he traveled for conferences, she suddenly had friends in the same cities. I hated myself for noticing. I hated that I felt like a paranoid stereotype. But the evidence kept stacking up, quietly, relentlessly. One evening, I asked her directly if something was going on. I tried to sound casual, non-accusatory. She looked genuinely offended, like I'd slapped her. "Do you seriously not trust me?" she asked, eyes filling with tears. I backed down immediately. Apologized. Told her I was stressed. That work was getting to me. She hugged me, told me she loved me, and I felt like the worst person alive for doubting her. Mark pulled me aside at work a few days later. He told me I seemed off, and asked if everything was okay at home. The irony nearly broke me. I said I was fine. Gaslighting is too strong a word, but that's what it felt like. Like I was being slowly trained to doubt my own instincts. Every time I thought, "This isn't right," someone I trusted told me it was. I started keeping mental notes. Times. Dates. Little inconsistencies. I wasn't ready to confront the truth, but I couldn't ignore it anymore either. Deep down, I think I already knew. I just wasn't ready for the moment when knowing would become undeniable. The turning point came from something stupid and mundane. Our shared laptop froze one night while my wife was using it. She asked me to fix it. I rebooted, logged back in, and her email was still open. I didn't plan to read it. I really didn't. But there it was. An entire thread with Mark. Dozens of messages. Some careful. Some reckless. Some so intimate I felt physically sick reading them. "I miss you. I wish I was with you right now. You make me feel alive." There were references to hotel rooms. To stolen afternoons. To how hard it was pretending in front of me. I remember whispering, "Oh my God!" over and over, like that might make it less real. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the laptop. When she came back into the room and saw my face, she knew. She didn't ask what was wrong. She just froze. I asked one question. "How long?" She started crying immediately. Not defensive. Not angry. Just broken. "Almost a year," she said. A year. While we celebrated birthdays. While we tucked our kids into bed. While I shook his hand at work and thanked him for opportunities. Everything after that felt like it happened underwater. Sounds muffled. Time distorted. My life split into a before and an after in a matter of seconds. I don't remember standing up, but suddenly I was pacing the room, yelling things I didn't even know I felt. I demanded details I immediately regretted asking for. Where? When? How many times? Why him? She tried to explain. Said it started as emotional support. That Mark understood her. That she felt invisible at home. Each word felt like a knife carefully aimed at my chest. I asked if she loved him. She hesitated. That pause hurt more than any confession could have. She said she was confused. That she loved me, but loved him too. I laughed at that. A sharp, ugly sound I didn't recognize as my own. When I asked if he knew I'd found out, she said no. I told her I worked with him. That I saw him every day. Her face collapsed under the weight of that reality. I slept on the couch that night. I stared at the ceiling until morning, replaying every interaction I'd ever had with Mark, trying to spot the moment he stopped being just my boss and became the man sleeping with my wife. I felt humiliated. Not just betrayed, but made into a fool. The kind of guy everyone pities behind his back. By morning, my anger had curdled into something heavier. Grief. Fear. The terrifying question of what my life would look like if everything I depended on was suddenly gone. The confrontation with Mark happened at work 2 days later. I didn't plan it. I walked into his office and shut the door behind me. He looked up, smiling, until he saw my face. I told him I knew. For a second, he tried to play dumb. Then he sighed and sat back in his chair like he'd been expecting this. He apologized. Said it wasn't supposed to happen. That it just got out of control. That he never meant to hurt me. I don't remember exactly what I said, only that my voice was shaking and my hands were clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked him how long he'd been lying to my face. He didn't answer that. HR got involved eventually. Not because I reported it, but because office rumors have a way of spreading. He took a leave of absence. I stayed. I don't know why. Pride, maybe? Or fear of losing the only stable thing left. At home, my wife wanted to work on us. She cried constantly. She said she'd end it with him. She begged me not to tell anyone. I felt trapped between rage and responsibility. Our kids laughed in the next room while our marriage quietly disintegrated behind closed doors. The emotional impact hit me harder weeks later, when the adrenaline wore off. That's when the panic attacks started. Random moments where my chest would tighten and I couldn't breathe. I questioned everything about myself. Was I boring? Unattractive? Too focused on work? Not enough of a man? My confidence eroded day by day. I also felt guilty, which made no sense and yet felt unavoidable. Guilty for not noticing sooner. Guilty for working so much. Guilty for considering leaving and breaking up the family. My wife oscillated between remorse and defensiveness. Some days she took full responsibility. Other days she blamed our emotional distance. Every conversation felt like walking through broken glass. Trust was gone. Completely. If she was 5 minutes late, my mind spiraled. If her phone buzzed, my heart raced. I hated the person I was becoming. Suspicious. Bitter. Exhausted. Friends noticed something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them. Saying it out loud felt like cementing it into reality. So I smiled. Nodded. Pretended. The loneliness was crushing. I was surrounded by people and felt utterly alone. There's a special kind of isolation that comes from being betrayed by the two people you trusted most. The consequences rippled outward in ways I didn't expect. Work became unbearable. Every hallway reminded me of him. Every meeting felt like a test of my composure. My performance slipped. I missed deadlines. I snapped at colleagues. Eventually, my manager, someone else, not Mark, asked if I needed time off. I took it, claiming burnout. At home, tension seeped into everything. The kids sensed it. They asked why Mom and Dad didn't laugh together anymore. Why I slept on the couch so often. We tried couples counseling. Sitting in that office, listening to my wife describe her affair in clinical terms, felt surreal. The therapist talked about rebuilding trust. I nodded along, but inside I felt hollow. Some nights I imagined staying. Growing old together anyway. Other nights I fantasized about packing a bag and disappearing. Both options terrified me. Mark eventually left the company. I didn't feel relief. Just emptiness. There was no dramatic closure. No apology that fixed anything. He moved on. My wife and I were left with the wreckage. I realized then that even if the affair ended, the damage didn't. It lingered in every interaction, every memory now tainted by doubt. Months passed. The initial shock dulled, replaced by a constant ache. We functioned. That's the best word for it. We functioned as parents, as roommates, as two people afraid to make a final decision. My wife wanted reassurance. She wanted me to tell her I forgave her. I couldn't. Forgiveness felt like a lie I'd be telling myself to make things easier. I started individual therapy. It helped me name things I'd been afraid to admit. That I was angry. That I felt emasculated. That I didn't trust my own judgment anymore. One session, my therapist asked me what I would tell a friend in my situation. The answer came too easily. You deserve better. Hearing my own words turn back on me hurt more than I expected. We talked about separation. Not as a threat, but as a possibility. My wife cried. I did too. 13 years doesn't disappear quietly. I moved into the guest room permanently. The distance felt both painful and necessary. I needed space to think without her presence constantly pulling at my emotions. I still loved her. That was the worst part. Love doesn't just vanish because trust is destroyed. It lingers, complicates everything, makes every choice feel wrong. The separation became official 6 months after I found out. No dramatic blow-up. Just a mutual acknowledgement that we were stuck in limbo, and it was destroying us both. We told the kids together. That conversation will haunt me forever. Their confusion. Their tears. The way they asked if it was their fault. I held it together until they went to bed, then broke down completely. Living alone was strange. Quiet. Too quiet. I missed the chaos I used to complain about. I missed the version of my wife I thought I had. Dating wasn't even on my radar. The idea of trusting someone again felt laughable. I focused on work, on therapy, on being present for my kids. Sometimes my wife and I would talk late into the night, reminiscing. Other times we'd argue like strangers. There was no clean emotional break. People eventually found out. Friends picked sides. Some avoided me entirely, uncomfortable with the messiness. Others offered support I hadn't expected. I learned how quickly life can unravel. How fragile identity is when it's built around relationships that can betray you. I wasn't the husband I thought I was anymore. I wasn't sure of who I was at all. A year later, the anger softened into something quieter. Sadness, mostly. Acceptance, maybe. I stopped replaying the affair in my head on a loop. The images lost some of their power. My wife started dating again. She told me out of courtesy. It hurt, even though I knew I had no claim anymore. That pain surprised me. Healing isn't linear. It circles back when you least expect it. Mark crossed my mind less and less. He became just another reminder of a chapter once survived, not a constant presence. That felt like progress. I focused on rebuilding myself in small ways. Exercising. Reconnecting with old friends. Allowing myself to enjoy things without guilt. There were nights I still lay awake, wondering what I could have done differently. Whether vigilance would have saved my marriage. Whether love can ever be truly safe. Therapy helped me understand that responsibility wasn't evenly shared. That betrayal is a choice, not an accident. Accepting that lifted a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying. I don't feel whole yet. Maybe I never will in the same way. But I feel more grounded. More honest with myself about what I want, and what I won't tolerate again. Co-parenting became our new normal. Awkward at first, then manageable. We learned to communicate without reopening old wounds, though sometimes they still bled. The kids adjusted better than I expected. They're resilient in ways adults forget to be. That doesn't mean it didn't affect them. I see it in their questions, their need for reassurance. I've had moments of intense loneliness. Holidays are the worst. Empty chairs amplify everything you've lost. I let myself feel it instead of numbing it like I used to. Occasionally, guilt resurfaces. Not for the affair, but for the family that no longer exists in the same form. I remind myself that staying in a broken marriage isn't the same as protecting a family. I've started to trust my instincts again, slowly. That feels like a victory. I ignored them once at great cost. I don't plan to do that again. I don't hate my ex-wife. That surprised me. I'm disappointed. Hurt. Changed. But hatred requires energy I don't have anymore. What remains is a cautious hope. Not for reconciliation, but for peace. For a future where this story is something I lived through, not something that defines me entirely. Sometimes I think about writing this story and then deleting it. Other times I feel like getting it out is the only way to make sense of it. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that betrayal doesn't just break trust in others. It fractures trust in yourself. Rebuilding that is slow, uncomfortable work. I still struggle with intimacy. I still flinch at secrecy. I still have days where a random memory knocks the wind out of me. Healing isn't neat. It's messy and nonlinear and deeply personal. I wish I could say there was a clear lesson, a moral wrapped up with a bow. There isn't. Life doesn't work like that. All I know is that ignoring red flags doesn't make them disappear. Love shouldn't require blindness. And silence, especially the kind meant to keep the peace, can cost you more than confrontation ever will. I don't regret loving my wife. I regret not listening to myself when something felt wrong. That's a mistake I carry forward as a warning, not a punishment. If you're reading this and something in your life feels off, don't dismiss it just because it's inconvenient. I did. And it changed everything. I don't know how this story ends yet. Maybe that's okay. Not every chapter needs a clean resolution to be meaningful. What I have now is quieter. Smaller. But it's honest. I wake up without pretending everything is fine. I go to sleep knowing I faced something that almost broke me and kept going anyway. Some days I miss the life I thought I had. Other days I'm grateful I don't have to live a lie anymore. Both can be true. If there's anything I want to leave you with, it's this: pay attention to your inner voice. It's easy to drown it out with routine, responsibility, and fear. But it's there for a reason. I'm still learning how to trust again. In others. In myself. In the idea that love doesn't have to come with constant anxiety. This is my confession. My truth. I'm not proud of how blind I was, but I'm proud I finally opened my eyes.